Thank you for joining us in our efforts to give you complete information about the candidates who have contested races on the Vermont primary ballot in Windham County. You should know that there are 3 candidates for state senate in the Democratic primary, with 2 ballot positions for the general election. One of those 3 is incumbent Jeanette White. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, it's kind of hard for me to describe you as a senior senator, but you are. You're the longest serving state senator. How long?
10 years now. If I win another seat, this will be starting my 11th year. So I've served 5 terms.
What do you think the role of a state senator should be in Windham County, Vermont, and how do you think you've contributed to the well-being of your constituents?
I think that the role of a senator has to be to first listen to what the constituents are saying on issues, understand the community, understand Windham County, what it is, the fact that Windham County is not just Brattleboro. Windham County is very diverse. In fact, Brattleboro is very diverse, but understand the diversity of it, what it's all about, and then try to bring that representation of what Windham County is to the Senate, and listening to constituents. But in the end, I think that because there's 40,000 people in Windham County, that's what we represent. So you're not going to have a like mind with 40,000 people. You're going to have many different opinions. So I believe that you're elected to use your best judgment, and that when people think you aren't using your best judgment, then you should be unelected. But so I think that you need to listen to what people are saying, and then you need to put all of that together and use your best judgment when you're coming up with issues. And it's a given that the House tends to be more parochial because they represent small areas. And that is indeed why the Senate was established. You know, it used to be only a unicameral body in Vermont.
One chamber as opposed to 2.
Yes, only the House. And some people will tell you that the House decided they couldn't do it all by themselves, and others will tell you that they made a huge mistake when they created the Senate. It depends on who you're talking to. But it was set up with the thought that the senators would be broader. They wouldn't tend to be as parochial. So when you're making decisions, you're not just representing the interests of Windham County. You're trying to do what's best for the entire state.
What is on the minds of constituents in the summer of 2012, and are they thinking about things that are pressing issues right now since it's the middle of summer?
Well, that is an issue because people tend to, first of all, people are thinking of the issues. Whether they're thinking of them in relation to an election is a different story, but they are thinking of the issues. You know, we had to move the primary up a couple weeks because of the federal elections law, which mandates that there has to be 45 days from the time that you get everything set until the election to give for the overseas voters, and that's primarily, of course, people in the military. So we had to move it. So getting people to think about the issues in August in relation to an election is a challenge. But I think they are thinking about it. They're always thinking about health care. They're always thinking about the economy and jobs. I believe they're always thinking about open government. I mean, you see that they're not thinking about it in terms of an election issue, but they're thinking about it. There's comments all the time about, did the select board do this in this town, or did the school board do that, and why were they doing it that way? So I think people are thinking of the issues, but then getting them motivated to translate those issues into an election and getting out and voting is the issue.
One of the things that has captivated some level of attention, especially in Brattleboro this summer, is how Vermont's open meeting law deals with all of the new electronic forms of communication, whether it be email, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, all of that. Has the legislature worked to update some of this? And if not, why not?
We have. Actually, the first year of the last biennium, we did, the Government Operations Committee, which I chair, did a huge, I thought actually that it was a really good bill on open meetings, redefining what open meeting means and how do you use. There was some, a little bit in there about use of electronics or technology or whatever. I'm a Luddite, so I probably use the wrong terms, but it's a very, the House never passed it. So we're going to take it up again in January. If I'm back there, that's one of the issues that we will deal with. It's a very touchy issue because there are so many levels to it. I mean, one is what constitutes a meeting. If you have 5 people on a select board, when can they email each other and when can't they? And if people have access to that, I think we did a pretty good job of defining what constitutes an open meeting. But then you have the added question of when you're in a meeting, should you be using the media to communicate with constituents out there who aren't at the meeting? And my feeling on that is that you should only do that if everybody hears it and has access to it. For one person to be communicating back and forth with people on the outside that aren't at the meeting, it would be like somebody sitting and whispering. Well, people do that all the time, but usually the select board members don't sit and whisper to people in the audience. So, but it's a very complicated issue, and we went round and round about it a lot, and I got a lot of advice from many of the younger members of both the House and the Senate on how we should do this, because clearly I'm not the one that you should ask.
And the other half of all that is what constitutes a public record.
Right.
If I'm a member of a select board and I post something on a Facebook or Twitter site, is that my position? Is that the official position of that body? How do you look at it?
Actually, we did pass the public records law. We did change that, and that passed, and so that's in force now. If it's done, if you post something in your role as a member of a body, it is your opinion as the member of the body. It isn't the opinion of the body itself, but it should be considered a public record because you're doing it in that role. If you post on your Facebook or whatever, wherever one posts things, something about the picnic at the park last week that has nothing to do with your role as the select board member, that's just your personal life. Because even though we don't like to think about it, people representing us on select boards and legislatures and stuff do have private lives. So I think there's a fine line there, but if you're 2 select board members and you're talking back and forth, that really doesn't constitute, well, that's meeting. But if you're expressing opinions about things, it could be a public record. So you just have to be really, really careful. We kind of use it as the frozen aisle conversation. If you're in the frozen food aisle at the grocery store and you're having a conversation between 2 of you, that's okay, and that isn't necessarily public record. If you have a 5-member body and the 3rd member joins you and you start talking about what's happening in town, you better be careful.
So you better be talking broadly.
You better be talking broadly. And if there's ever a question, my advice always is, and I think that the way the legislation is written is, if there's ever a question, if you have this little niggling thought in the back of your mind, I wonder, then you better not do it. Just don't do it.
What's going to be happening with the future of health care in Vermont, and what will the legislature be doing to deal with what's been talked about as how the future landscape of health care in Vermont is going to go, whether it be single payer or not, and how will it be paid for?
Well, I think how it will be paid for is clearly going to be the biggest issue this year. And I have my feelings on how I think it should be paid for. And there are a lot of, I mean, you can imagine there are 180 legislators, so there are 180 opinions. And then there's the governor, and he has an opinion, and his staff members all have an opinion. So there are a lot of opinions out there. But I think that financing is going to be a big issue this year. And in my mind, I think we should do it in a graduated tax, some kind of a broad-based tax, probably a combination of income tax and payroll tax. And that, there was a question the other morning at the chamber breakfast about that, and somebody said, well, I can't afford it. My premiums are already so high now. If I have to pay a payroll tax, I can't do that. But the payroll tax would be in place of the premiums, not in addition. So if you're currently not paying premiums for your employees, and this guy over here is, your costs are going to go up because you haven't been paying up to this point. This person's costs are going to hopefully go down because he's been paying and now everybody's paying.
So what is being done to ease the transition between point A and point B?
You mean
from the way things are now to the way things would be if legislation is passed making changes?
Well, I'm not exactly sure how to answer that because I'm not sure exactly what we'll end up with as point B. So whatever we do, I think we're making changes right now, and we have been for the last few years. The blueprint is a huge issue, how we reimburse doctors. There's a whole bunch of initiatives going on right now that are paving the way and making steps toward what hopefully, in my opinion, will end up being a single payer system, so that all the payments come through. And basically it's Medicare for everyone.
And you would favor that as opposed to the current situation?
Absolutely. I think that we have, if you talk to doctors' offices, we really only have 3 primary carriers in Vermont. Well, 5, Medicare, Medicaid, and then Cigna, MVP, and Blue Cross Blue Shield. But each of those might have 10 or 12 different policies that they're dealing with. So doctors' offices are dealing with anywhere between 50 and 100 different policies that they have to, they're spending a lot of administrative time doing that when they should be focusing on health care. And so I think we can cut administrative costs. Plus we're paying insurance companies to administer it. We'll still be paying somebody to administer it. And in my perfect world, we would probably contract with somebody, and that might be Blue Cross Blue Shield. They're a quasi-state entity. They're set up as a nonprofit in the state of Vermont. And I believe that Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont is the only one Blue Cross Blue Shield program that's left as its own entity. All the others are owned by Anthem or somebody else. So that's the way I would do it. But yeah, I would prefer that.
Do you foresee the legislature working at all on more post-Storm Irene matters come January?
Well, after the FEMA announcement the other day that said, oh, sorry, we told you we were going to pay for those? Oh, we were just kidding you. I see us having to do a lot more. We based all of our budget projections and all of our expenditures on what FEMA was telling us at the time. And as of last Friday morning, we were told that they may pay for nothing, they may pay for a little bit, they may pay for a lot, but apparently those 8 months they sat in the governor's office up there and worked along with the administrators, they didn't know what they were talking about. It's stunning to me that, well, actually, I should say that it doesn't necessarily surprise me because I've seen some of the other shenanigans, but it is shocking, and I think that as a legislature, we now will have to relook at the budget. Just the state buildings, and we're now, our budget for that is $20 million short, just for the state buildings. That doesn't include any of the other work that we thought they were going to help pay for. So I think we're going to have to continue to deal with it. We are also going to, my committee, if I'm elected and if I continue to be chair, we're going to look at the role of Vermont Emergency Management and how that all fit together. And it's one of the agencies that our committee oversees. Well, not oversees, but has responsibility for. So we're going to look at that.
The role of Vermont Emergency Management as related to natural disasters or what?
Or anything. We're just going to start kind of looking at it and seeing where we are with it. We haven't looked at it for a long time. We're going to do the same thing with law enforcement coverage on how, because we always have the problem of state police, sheriffs, local officials, and how they work together, and the fact that some of them get paid at this rate and some of them get paid at this rate and some of them have good retirement and some of them don't, and some places where they have a barracks use the barracks for their local coverage, and so they don't provide their own law enforcement. And is that then fair to Brattleboro, who pays for the state police but also pays its own law enforcement, because that's what you have to do? So they're paying for those other towns' law enforcement because they're reimbursing the state police. So we're going to look at all of that. Those are some of the departments that are under our control, are not under our control, but are within our jurisdiction.
Interesting. So I hate to bring up the 8 million pound gorilla in the room, but
which one would that be?
That would be Vermont Yankee and its
one.
continuing status.
That one. Yeah.
Given court decisions of the past year, is there room for involvement by the legislature, and if so, what would it be?
I don't. At this point, I think we just have to wait and see what happens. I think we did some things last year around the generation tax. I believe there are still some things that we should do around the dry cask storage, and I want to look again at the levels at the perimeters, at the fence lines, and I don't know what we can do about. I guess we waited too long to tell them to get their water permit, which seems a little bit ridiculous that the NRC didn't actually, since that's supposed to be one of the criteria for giving them the permit, that they didn't pick up on that. But so I don't know what the role is going to be, but if there is a role, you can be assured that I will be in there fighting.
Okay. You have a primary.
I do.
You don't normally get a primary, but it happens sometimes.
Well, it happened last year.
Okay.
Election. And my first one, remember, 8 candidates.
That's right.
That's right, yeah.
A total of 8 candidates.
8 candidates in the primary. Mm-hmm.
How do you separate out who the voter would think is doing a good job or not? On what criteria should they be judging who they vote for?
Oh, boy. I guess that what they need to do is talk to each of us, listen to us, decide if we represent what they think, if they think we have, and not always just if we represent their position, because I don't pretend to be able to represent the position of 40,000 people, or even 20 or probably 2,000 people on every issue. I sometimes am confused about my own stand on issues until I've heard all of the sides. But I think that that voters need to look at whether they believe that we can look at all the issues, weigh them, and then use good judgment to make the best decision that would be the best for Vermont and Vermonters. And I think that that's really what you have to do, because, and you're going to vote clearly for somebody who has a general, whose general values and opinions and positions are the same as yours, but they're not going to be the same on every issue. And I certainly have managed to make some people angry on votes, I'm sure. The Chamber of Commerce only gave me a 17% rating, so I didn't do all the things they wanted, but I think that what you have to do is look at people's judgment and whether you think that they have the capability of weighing all the issues, understanding them, and then making a good judgment.
So does a 10-year incumbent state senator campaign, and if so, how?
Well, I do campaign. I'm getting signs up. In fact, I'm asking everybody that has those signs again in their backyards or under their dog dishes or wherever they happen to have them, using them as the roof on their chicken coop, or to clean them off and put them up again. They can put them back on the chicken coop after November if they want to, but get them out there. And doing things like this and making sure that people know that I'm running again. And and letting people know, clearly a lot of people know what my stand is on a number of issues now. And it's, so you have positive record to stand on, but you also have negative because you've managed to vote against the way some people thought you should vote. So you have to defend that and try and explain it and get people to understand why you did that. So I am campaigning. I'm not taking anything for granted. I think that that's very foolish. So, and I wanted to one more thing about how what you're doing is, I think that you also look at what you've been able to get, what people have been able to get done, and clearly, if you're running for the first time, you can't look at that because you haven't been able to get anything done in the Senate because you haven't been there. But you can look at the ways people have interacted in other situations and how they've worked together to get things done and to come to some kind of conclusion. So I think that you need to do that. And I have to say, I love being in the Senate. I really do. I love public policy. It's listening to all the ideas, all the various opinions, everybody's opinion, and trying to put them together and come up with something that is good for Vermont and that honors everybody's opinion. I really like that.
Well, Jeanette, we really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. In case people would like to find out more prior to the primary on the 28th, how can they do that?
Well, they could call me at home, which is 387-4379. They could email me, and I have for purposes of campaign, I don't use my legislative email. So my email for this purpose, if it's about an issue of legislation last year, they can email my legislative email, which is jwhite@leg.state.vt.us. But if anybody wants to ask about campaign issues or anything like that seems a little more political, it's Jeanette White Vermont, all one word, at Yahoo.
All right. Well, again, Jeanette White, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your doing this.
And again, Jeanette White is one of 3 candidates on the Democratic ballot in Vermont's August 28th primary.
Voting anytime.
You can vote now. In fact, you can vote absentee right up until the day before the election. Thank you very much for watching us, and remember to vote.